Well, good evening. We're going to talk about Chapter 9, Routing and Remote Access. We're going to talk about how to install it. What is a virtual private network? What?
Projector.
You'll say yours. Understand Windows Server 2008 Remote Access Service. We're going to talk about how to implement and manage a virtual private network and configure a VPN server. Okay? These are just the objectives. So, we're also going to figure out how to dial up a remote access server, how to troubleshoot a VPN, and install and configure terminal servers. Now, last week you did everything in Chapter 8 labs with the exception of activating the DNS and DHCP. You will do all labs in 9 and 10. Okay? What is RAS? Well, it allows you to remote in using tunnels, dial-up, or VPNs. What is a VPN? Well, it's a tunnel connection that allows you to go from point to point, and it allows only those that have network credentials to be accessed to that device. All right. Dial-up networking, you very hardly ever see this anymore. They used to, it's a big thing. Dial-up networking, when you have 56K modem, you dial up a 1-800 number. Remember AOL? That was RAS. You dialed up, they authenticated you, you had access. Okay, here's the VPN network. I've got my two laptops up here on my computer. They all connected to this router who then sends it over here through this other subnet. It's all still tunneled. Coming in, if I have an outside card DSL, that tells you how old this is. DSL adapters. You take them in, they come in through the firewall, they're all in these tunnels. That is VPN. You're virtually not on the same place. You're in a virtual location, and you're just coming in just acting like you are on that network. That's what VPN is. Here's a dial-up connection. The computers dial up to the modem bank. The modem bank then sends the traffic into the wall. The wall then sends it inside the Ethernet tunnel, and you get authenticated that way. Pretty simple. VPN uses LAN protocols for tunneling protocols. You're going to hear of L2TP, which is Layer 2 tunneling protocol. PPTP, point-to-point tunneling protocol. What is point-to-point tunneling protocol used for? That's used for businesses when they have that remote backup domain controllers and read-only domain controllers in different locations than the original domain controller. The link that goes between the two is a point-to-point tunneling protocol. So they can send that traffic with it being encrypted. Does that make sense? Y'all kind of see where it's coming a little bit better. The benefit of the VPN, users connect to that local ISP, connect through their ISP to your local network. They can have access to their desktop, all their shares, anything they need to do. To create a tunnel, the client connects to the internet by establishing a connection using some routing protocol. Okay. Once they're connected, then they establish a VPN or a tunnel. So when I pick up the phone and I first pick it up, I get that public switch telephone network. You hear that, right? Okay, I've established my connection. Then I start hitting numbers. So I'm narrowing my focus down to Cameron's phone number so that when it rings on his end, he can pick it up. Now we have that connectivity inside the tunnel. Does that make sense? Remote access remote access protocols carry network packets over the WAN. Pretty simple concept. Like I said, it's basically redundancy for the first 15 slides on here. Sorry. But what we're going to do is we'll send it through a TCP/IP port or on TCP/IP protocols. But you're going to be on TLS more than likely. All right. And inside that, you'll be running PPTP if you're going from server to server, or L2TP, which is Layer 2 tunneling protocol. All right. To where if you're getting to a switch and then getting out to your resources or whatever you need to do. Then we had what was called SLIP. It was basically just a Unix way of dialing up serial line interface or internet protocol. It's point-to-point connectivity instead of TLS or PPTP. It's SLIP. All right. Compressed serial line interface, or CSLIP, basically all it does is compress everything in the SLIP packets when it sends it. Point-to-point protocol, it's used more common now than SLIP was when SLIP first became, so everything kind of uses PPP. Then what are the versions of PPP? Well, you have PPP, or PPTP, which is what we were talking about, point-to-point tunneling protocol used for server-to-server, L2TP, computers to servers, and secure socket tunneling protocol, or SSTP. PPTP, basically it's just a Microsoft point-to-point encryption, allows the servers to talk. All right, that's why you use it. Think of it as point-to-point on your LAN connections from router to a router. They're point-to-point. So if you're doing a server-to-server, even though you're going to be going, the traffic's going through many routers, you're going to be doing a point-to-point. Layer 2 tunneling protocol works very similar to PPTP. All it is basically it's layer 2 forwarding that allows you to send it through the MAC address because you're already you're already on that network. You all understand that? When I create that tunnel and I got the authentication for the tunnel, I'm already on your network. So why do I have to go through a layer 3 IP address to find you? You're associating with my MAC address. Does it make sense now? In IP security, you can also add that to layer 2 tunnelable protocol. Then we get into SSTP. It employs the same authentication, but it's basically for the web. Think of it, secure socket. Where have you heard that before? Secure socket layer, maybe? Or from HTTPS? So secure socket tunneling protocol is the HTTP version of VPN. Does that make sense? Have I lost you? Cole? Going once, going twice? Okay. The general steps. Well, first thing we got to do is we got to install the network protection and access server, or network policy and access server. I'm losing my mind. NPAS. Once we get that roll, then we can start VPNs. We can do our RAS. We can do all sorts of stuff. We can configure VPN server as a DHCP relay agent so that when I get it, then I can, if I have multiple computers, I can DHCP myself. The VPN server properties, and I can configure remote access policy so that if this person does log on, how many of y'all have heard network protection? Y'all remember seeing that? Network protection. If I do this remote access policy, if you don't meet the minimum requirements of this role or this policy, you do not get connectivity. In other words, if you are one update behind on Microsoft updates, you do not connect to this network. It's the minimum requirements. So we're not going to do that. DHCP relay agent, basically all it does is broadcast your IP configuration between the DHCP server and the client acquiring the IP address. All right. You can use the RAS tool to configure that VPN server, or is it relay agent? And y'all are going to all be doing that. I'm just not taking the time in class, as you know, to do it because we'd run out of time. After the VPN server is set up, you can further configure it from RAS. Everything you're going to be configuring from that NPAS or RAS role. Does that make sense? So here's what you're going to see with routing and remote access. Are we going to be an IPv4? Are we going to be IPv6? What type of traffic do you want? You can turn on both. You can turn on either. It's up to you. You remember on the profile on the individual when you created a user, it said dial-in properties? That's where it links up to here. Okay. You have different tabs. You got the security tab, IPv4, 6, and PPP and logging. Multi-link enables to combine aggregate 2 or more communication channels so they appear as one big channel. It's multi-channel. The problem with that is it has to be implemented on the client as well as the server. And if you got a client, why do they need multiple connections? Is showing as one. Okay. Then we have what we call a bandwidth allocation protocol. It ensures the client's connection has enough speed or bandwidth for the particular thing. You don't want someone saying that you have to have a minimum connection of a LAN, but they're on dial-up, right? Are they going to be able to focus or do anything? How many of y'all have seen that in like virtual servers or stuff? It says, well, what's your connectivity speed or there's been a couple websites say, what is your connectivity speed so we can download this traffic. If you're on a 56K dial-up, it's going to take you X amount of time. If you're on a T1 line, it's going to take you 30 seconds. Okay, that's what a multi-link is. It gives you the process of, or the ability to configure it so that people that are on 56K dial-ups can get the same as those that are on T1s or fast Ethernet. You can set up VPN security through remote access policy. We're going to talk a little bit about that. You're going to implement those. You're going to implement some access permissions, conditions, constraints, and settings. Don't be surprised if I don't put it on here. Establishing a remote access policy and tool to create remote access policies. Again, you're going to go into the RAS area. Access server. A single network device can house multiple modems, right? ISDN, T1, T3, LAN. You can have synchronous, asynchronous modems, null modems, or just regular dial-up line. So what kind of connectivity do you want as a minimum requirement? How many of y'all have heard of an X.25 line? ISDN line. Least communications, your T lines, T1, T3. Cable modem, frame relay. You don't see many frame relays anymore. Again, you've got to install RAS to configure those type of connections. You can configure dial-up security at the user account and say, remember I was just talking about that dial-up tab on the user. You can configure the security and how they're going to authenticate and how what type of device they can use to dial in with. And here it is. I can control it through my network policy. I can deny them access, or I can allow them access blanket. I'll allow this, they can come in anonymously once they type in their name. They can get into everything. Do you want that? No, you really want to leave it through here. You can verify the caller ID by putting in their number, and you can set it to automatically call back if you lose connectivity if they give you your number. So that way, I always leave this unchecked, because what happens if you're on, if you're going somewhere? You can be at a hotel dialing in, right? No, your hotel number is not going to be the same. I can assign a static IP address to this connection if I wanted to. Don't have to. Or I can apply static route so that I know what the IP is going to be. It's going to be on this route. After RAS is installed and configured, you can then create your policy. What you can do for your policy, you can click Start, Control Panel, Network, Internet Connections, create a connection, go through the steps, create your VPN tunnel. Okay, y'all seen the little network icons that say VPN connectivity? That's what it is. Troubleshooting VPN or dial-up RAS server communications problems can be divided into hardware or software, because why? You have both hardware and software type devices. If it's a hardware solution, device manager will let you know by the little funky exclamation point or the big red one with the white X saying, hey, it doesn't work. You want to make sure the telephone lines are physically connected. That is probably the #1 problem of people trying to connect a VPN. I can't connect. Why? You didn't plug it in. Make sure the modem is plugged in correctly as well. And if it's an internal PCMCIe kind of card, make sure that it's plugged in correctly. Test the telephone. Make sure that there is a connectivity there. Because sometimes you can connect everything perfectly, but that outlet has been turned off. Does you no good. And then if it's beyond that, then you need to call your ISP or back to your IT department, which, yeah, they'll be calling us, hey, it's not working, right? Luckily, we can do it through wireless now. We don't have to necessarily, once we get that connectivity, we're good. Software solutions, we can talk to computer management or server manager to make sure that the firewall hasn't blocked them with connectivity with ports being blocked. Make sure the VPN or dial-up RAS server is still enabled, that there's no errors or something that's turned it off or stopped the service. Check it to make sure that that individual has the correct permissions to be able to access remotely. How many times do we forget to give them the permissions and they send them on their way and then they can't connect and they wonder why? Be certain that the server is always started, though. I guarantee if the server goes down, you can have more than one person calling in. In RAS tool, you can check the network interface. Again, it's all software install. Take a look at your icon, make sure the icon shows connectivity. If you're using a Radius server for authentication, make sure that the IAS is running. If only certain clients are not having connection problems, then it's a physical, usually, connection. If everyone has a problem, it's probably the server. It's a software issue. But if not, if it's just like Cameron's calling up and everyone else in here connected, then it's probably a physical connection. Does that make sense? Always start with the physical before you go up to the software. Because when you start screwing around with that, you screw around with everybody. Make sure the client account has the connectivity. We just talked about that. Terminal server. What is a terminal server? Well, it enables clients to run services, software, and application instead of at the client. I can run them on the server themselves. Makes it nice. So I'm not taking up my resources on my computer to navigate in. Everything's running off the network server. Okay? Because when you're tunneling, you're using more traffic on your end. So do you want to bog that traffic down? And that's why. Terminal service basically support thin clients. How many of y'all seen a thin client before? How many of you walked into your bank? The teller machines are all thin clients. Their terminal service back into a server in that building, which is probably back up to wherever their main location is, and that's how they authenticate. They just turn it on, and their mouse and monitor is the only thing they get. Everything's running on the application that's on the server. Installing terminal service, you need to install the terminal services role. Make sure you have a terminal services license. Now here's what's really cool. There are two types of service license that can be installed in terminal services. And I'll get to that here in just a second, but 2003 has a bypass. I'm going to tell you something that you can do to not ever have to pay for Windows 2003 server terminal service licenses. Don't do it per server, do it per user, per seat. Reason being, in their infinite wisdom, they pushed out 2003 before they finished updating the code for it. So they have no way to authenticate your terminal services, the amount of people that connect in. So if you say 10,000, you can set the per seat as 10,000 and connect in all the time. That's not going to be a problem. Because even in their own book, they said if you do it by per seat, it only has to find a terminal server to authenticate. If you do it per server, it goes to Microsoft to authenticate. You have the license and then come back. If you do it per seat, you already have a server locally. So if it can find the server, you're good. Pretty neat little trick, huh? So I just saved you, let's see, what is it, about $50 a license, Jerry, per seat? Or have you ever bought any?
I never bought any.
Last time I checked, it was about $50 a license. So that would have been what? I said 10,000? That'd be $500,000 that just saved you. $500,000. Where's my interest? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, network level authentication. That enables the authentication to take place before the terminal service is established. That way the attackers couldn't do anything. When you boot it up, does it have is this machine allowed? If you know you only have X number of machines, only set it to the X number so that if someone else pops up, it doesn't work. Okay? Configuring terminal services. You got to make sure that you have at least a NIC for each server, which is going to handle the multiple clients. Terminal Service Manager allows you to monitor the number of users, add more servers if you want, determine if a server is active in their services, disconnect a user. That's always fun. Reset a connection if it's having trouble, and you can send a user a message. Okay, when you set up the terminal server, you must make sure that you activate the terminal services licensing server. That's the server I was talking about that you have to have locally. And configure the licensing by using TS Licensing Manager, and that's where you do it by the seat, and you make 10,000. Okay, y'all be able to do that. Actually, I don't think it's going to let you because this is 08. I'm not sure if they fixed it by 08 or not, but at least in 03 they had. In 03 R2 they have it. Terminal services. How many of you are familiar with remote desktop connection, RDC? Now it's called RDP, remote desktop protocol. But anyway, it allows you to have your desktop. How many of you have done like Log Me In or Team Viewer or something like that? That's remote desktop. That's all it is. Where you actually get access to your remote desktop. By the way, go to Team Viewer. It's free. And you get everything that you would have gotten Log Me In Pro for free with Team Viewer, as long as you don't use it for commercial purposes. Team Viewer. Okay, steps for using RDC in Windows XP. I forget XP, but you have to go into the properties on the server, whether you go into computer, my computer, whatever it's going to be called, depending on your operating system. Right click, go down to system properties, brings it up, go to the remote tab, and then click allow connectivity. Okay. Otherwise, or allow remote connections. If you don't, you're not be able to remote into that computer, right, Jerry? And then installing applications on the terminal server, you can install them as long as they're server-based applications, and it makes it easy. Any questions on that?
On the dial-up, isn't it kind of, I don't know, very outdated because
it is outdated, but
I looked up on there, that's only 3% of people actually use
You know why? Because most hotels now have Wi-Fi or LAN in the rooms.
Yeah.
So it's a lot quicker, so that's why they don't do it. But if you go to a hotel that was built in like the 1950s, where you may only have dial-up, you still have to have that connectivity. Unless you just tell them to get on a Wi-Fi. Usually those old houses have bought a cable modem and put it in. All right. How are we going to secure it? How are we going to secure our Windows 2000 Server 8? What? What?
Firewall?
Well, we're going to unplug it, right? Put it in a room with a safe with the guard in front of it. Then you can never use it. Remember, you want to reduce an attack size or the attack surface. What do we mean by that? You only want to have the services or roles or what you're using specific to that server, nothing else. If I'm running an IIS server, I only want IIS on it. If I'm running anything else besides IIS, what's going to happen? That's able to be attacked because what you're focused on an application server. Applications, not web or DNS, RODC. You're going to expand your group policy to make sure that you've covered each type. You're going to have Windows Firewall. You can put in network access protection, so if the system doesn't meet the minimum requirements, you can kick them off. You'll have a security configuration wizard, which will help guide you through it and show you. Y'all played with that a little bit earlier, didn't y'all? The SCW, a couple chapters ago. User account control, BitLocker, drive encryption. So, where's a good place for the web? Well, we call it the demilitarized zone, DMZ, right? It's the area between two firewalls that's external to your internal network, but it protects you from more traffic. You're basically that's where you also put your honeypots, by the way. Portion of the network between the two networks, such as private and internet, like I was just describing. And you have group policy. Group policy, you can basically control anything in the system you want. Group policy is a way to bring consistent security and other management to anything inside of Windows. The one thing that I hate more than anything else is this guy right here, the UAC, User Account Controls, came out in Vista. Didn't that annoy you where the screen would go gray for every little thing you needed to do? Running as administrator, you're spending half your time putting in your username and password, so getting rid of that, turning it off. Even though then you get the little security box, it's a security violation. You can actually disable this totally in security policy if you want. But what it does is make sure that no one does what they're not supposed to. That's what it's about. BitLocker drive encryption, what does that do? Well, it encrypts your drive so the fact that if it gets moved to another device, you're not going to be able to get into it. Group policy. How many of y'all have dealt with group policy? How much is on here about group policy? Group policy in Windows, we're going to be talking about it in 11 and 12. That's where the bulk of group policy comes out. It enables you to standardize your working environment, clients and servers, and user controls, what can happen on the computer, what can happen when a user logs into it. You remember seeing that on local security policies? You have a user and you have your computer. Same idea, it's just on a bigger scale and scope. Part of the group policy, you can set it for a site, a domain, an OU, or a local computer. It cannot be set for a non-OU folder containers, such as users, groups, it's any folder that was created by Active Directory, I'll put it that way. All right? And all the group policy settings are stored in what we call GPOs, or group policy objects. Group policy object, what is it? Well, it can be local or non-local. And it can be set up to affect user accounts so that James can only hit the start button on his computer. You know, you can lock it down that far. You can set permissions as to how long you're going to have access to it. You know, you can put any constraint that you want in the system on there. And as you see it, you'll understand. Like I said, you have your domain policy here, default domain policy. Well, you're going to have multiple different policies. Never mess with the default domain policy. Always create the policy that pertains to the OU of which you're trying to affect. If you use the defaults, A doesn't really like to work very well. But you're going to have computer configuration, you're going to have user configuration. You actually have a couple more things underneath here as we go on. But security policies are a subset of individual policies within a larger group policy for a site, domain, or OU with a local computer. You can do account policies, audit policies, user rights, security options, IP security policies. When you start going through here, I want you to really pay attention to Chapter 10 as you do your homework assignments, all the homework assignments in Chapter 10. Account policies. Security measures set up in a group policy that applies to all accounts in a container. What is that container? That's that OU container that we created in Active Directory once it's installed. Password security. I can set it up and apply different password policies to different organizations or different OUs underneath there. Maybe accounting has to have a 21-digit password or 21-character password. IT has a 5-character password. You didn't catch that, did you? Just because you're mean to them. Okay, we can set specific things on it, right? Password history, age, minimum password age, password length, password complexity. Do not ever do this. If you enable that, what you're doing is say, I'm going to store it in clear text. If you go into the SAM file and you read someone that's passwords in clear text, it's because they have this checked. I eat clients alive on security audits when that's checked. Leave it disabled or not configured. Account lockout. What is account lockout? It prevents you from getting access until you reach a certain criteria, whether it's time, how many times you've been locked out, then it disables your account, or your administrator lets you back in. Okay? A common policy is to leave lockout to go into effect after 5 to 10 unsuccessful attempts. 3. Why? If I give them 10 attempts to break my dictionary attacked password, and then what you have is you can set the time reset counter so after 60 minutes, all those 5 lockouts go back. You know, if you've locked yourself out 60 minutes, that counter gets reset and you can go back into do brute force again. So if you set it to 3, now you've really limited that space, right? Because people will catch themselves mistake a couple times. Lockout parameters, you have the duration, threshold, and reset account. We already talked about that. Kerberos security, basically all it is a token or a ticket. James, you're coming up to me, you're buying a baseball ticket to go to the baseball game. All right? Then you go to Cameron. Cameron's the gate guard. You hand him the ticket. He looks at it, authenticates it's the right date and time, hands it back to you, lets you through, right? That's what Kerberos is. You ask me for an authentication, I give you a token. You take it to Cameron. Cameron says, yep, that token's valid. Come on through. If it's not, too bad, so sad. That's essentially what it is. Since Vista came out, in 2K8 came out, they've now encrypted it into AES, which is the top of the line right now for what you can get to. NSA is a lot stronger than that, I'm sure. Options available for configuring Kerberos. You can enforce user logons. You can set a lifetime maximum for the service ticket or for the user ticket. And maximum lifetime, let's say you only want James to come once. Are you going to reset, give him a maximum of 10 times that he can reset his Kerberos ticket? No, you'll give him one, right? A maximum tolerance for the computer clock synchronization. Let y'all get to do with that on Chapter 10. Examples of events that an organization can audit are as follows. I can audit your account logon or log-offs. What do I want to do? Do I want to look for the logon failures? Or log-off failures? No, you want to look for the logon failures. Why? Because that gives you an idea that someone's either is a granny and doesn't know what she's doing, or he's doing, or you have a hacker. Like they say, there's two types of systems. Those that have been hacked, and they know it, and those that have been hacked. Or I should say, those that know they've been hacked and those that have been hacked. Object access, policy change, privilege use, process tracking. User rights. What is user rights? That allows me to tell Jordan he can go in and be a full control over a folder. And then with the inherited permissions, every folder below that he has full control over. But he cannot get to the one above it. Unless he's in a group that has full control, obviously. Okay? It's the most basic right that you will get. Some extended privileges you can get are to add workstations to the domain, backup files and directories, change the system time, create permanent shared objects. There's a lot of things you could give users rights to do. Do you want to? Example of logon rights are as follows. Access the computer from the network, allow log on locally. That is a huge deal. Because once you add a domain controller, if you put yourself in the remote web group, you lose your permissions to log in locally as an administrator. Kind of stinks that you have to go to another computer to log in to change that so you can go log in locally. So just be careful on that. It's happened to me several times. Yeah, you want to deny login locally? No, you want to allow login locally. You need to put your name on there so that it gives you permission to allow login locally. There are over 78 specialized security options that are inside GPOs. Think how much fun you can have. Security policies, IPsec. Well, what is it? It supports IPsec communication between. Once it starts between the two computers, the first exchanges certificates and authenticates against the server. The NIC starts sending computers as formatted into an IP packet. IPsec then provides security for all those TCP/IP-based application communication protocols. So, once you start your communication, you authenticate, you get your tunnel set up, then IPsec can hit. Does that make sense now? A computer that is configured to use IPsec communication can function in 3 of the roles: client, secure server, or server. Let you deal with that. Active Directory Rights Management Service. All that does is allow you to configure rights management. Pretty simple. Rights Management Services is developed by Microsoft so that you can do spreadsheets, documents, email, any type of application stuff. Who has access to do that kind of stuff? General steps used in RMS security. A user creates a Word document. The process creating document with the RMS. Word encrypts the document using AES key and an additional RSA key on top of it. The Active Directory Rights Management Server issues the identity license to the client who can access the document. That client shows the license to the document, gains access. Did y'all follow that? Seriously, did you follow it? James creates a document. Anthony, you want to see it. Once he creates the document and saves it, it's encrypted in AES, then has an RSA key put on top of it. It's sitting on the network. You want to see it. You say, I want to see it. It validates your license that you match that RSA key, then it will unencrypt the AES for you to see the document. That's all it does. Does that make a little more sense to you now? That's validate who you say you are, right? Managing security using security templates and security configuration analysis snap-ins. I hate snap-ins. The snap-in allows you to set up security to govern the following: account policies, local policies, event logs, groups, registry, and file system security. Y'all going to be doing those by yourself? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, just adding in snap-ins. You can do client security using policies. We can customize settings by the clients to offer several advantages: enhanced security, provides consistent environment and organization. The settings are customized by the configuring policies on the server. So when the client logs into the network, the policies are going to be applied to them. Basically, all this is saying is, I create a security policy for you. When you log in, it gets implemented. I shortened that one, didn't I? Cole, when you log into your network, I give you the security policy, and that's all you can do. That's all it says. They put in a lot more words. You manually configure one or more policies by doing GPO edits, and then you're going to be able to do that because you're going to have to do it for this. And this will tell you how to do it. Publishing applications. How do you publish an application? This is going to be very important to understand publishing applications or hardware. It involves setting up a software through the group policy so that the application is available for users to install from a central application. That's for applications only. Assigning applications. You can assign an application directly to a user's desktop or making a link for them to access it. Resultant set of policies at RSOP. Basically, it allows troubleshooting of those types of policies, simpler for an administrator. You can query the policies to see what the information is. You remember that blue page that as you step down in group policy, you can see it. That's what the RSOP is. When you deploy NTFS, you can use the encrypt attribute to protect folders and files. Again, if you do it, all it does is encrypt it, and then those that have permissions can unencrypt it. But don't compress it. Cipher command, you can use the cipher command with all these parameters to do what you need to do. BitLocker drive encryption, we already talked about that a little bit last chapter, where basically all it does is encrypts the hard drive so that if it moves from one computer to the other, you can't do anything. And it's used to protect the hard drive, or TPM is. Trusted Platform Module, it's a hardware device that can be used instead of the software BitLocker. Same idea, that's all it is. TPM chip is a hardware chip. You have to have a pin. BitLocker drive encrypts everything on there you get to do with BitLocker. Then we come up to NAT. What's NAT? Network Address Translation. So there's two important functions. It allows you to hide create internal IP addresses that are hidden from external, and you can use those infinitely on the internal, like your 192.168s or your 172.16s or your 10 dots. That's what NAT does. It'll convert those IP addresses to your live IP address so that when it goes out, you look as one IP address. Thus, it prevents people hacking that one. It only gets to that firewall, and that's where it stops. NAT uses a pool of private addresses, just like when you're doing DHCP, the pool of addresses, same difference. You're really doing a NAT. And then you may have one or a very small pool of really globally unique IP addresses, which would be your live IP addresses. Essentially, let's say you have Cox cable, it comes into your router or to your modem, it's still a live IP address till it gets to the WAN port on your router. Your router then before it hits the switch, has a chip in there that will actually do a NAT. So everything behind it is that 192.168, but you have a live IP address for that router. It gets to that router. Everyone, when it comes back out, the static route will say you are forwarding out this port, and it's this live IP address. But from the outside, it looks like you have one computer. You may have 300 computers. Now you understand how NAT comes in. Basically, it helps you to do a CIDR, or class of center domain routing and subnetting. That's what NAT allows you to do. Windows Firewall basically is the same technology that was in XP and 2K3. And What it does just allows you is a software-based firewall that allows you to block incoming and outgoing ports. It's not as robust as, let's say, ISA. I forget what ISA stands for. Integrated Software Appliance, I believe, is what it's called. But it's the Windows firewall. You only had it for ISA 2005 and 2006, and they did away with it because it's all local now. The exceptions are the programs that you choose to allow through the firewall in both directions. Like I said, you can either do it TCP by the protocol, either TCP UDP. Specific ports 1 to 65,536 or 535. IPv4 or IPv6. What specific interfaces and what services that you want to access, like LDAP, SMTP, SNMP, www, HTTP. NAP, network address protection. We already talked a lot about this today, where what is going to happen if your computer does not meet minimum requirements, you're not accessing. IPsec, again, all it does is work in conjunction with NAP to make sure that you validate your authentication is correct, that they have access to it. And then we have the Health Registration Authority. This is what says, oh, if I say you have to be these levels and I give specific requirements, if your computer does not, then they send you a link to the HRA. Your HRA will then tell you what you need to be compliant in order to gain access to the network. VPN, NAP works through a VPN by enforcing the remote access policy by giving you the NAT addresses so you're not a live address. Okay, your external outside the tunnel is alive, but inside the tunnel you have a private IP address. So when you go to ipconfig, what are you going to see? You're going to see the external, but on the server, you'll be an internal. If you click on the VPN connection, right-click it, then you'll see your internal. Does that make sense? DHCP, y'all did that last week. It's always been a vulnerable protocol because it comes out without security. If you ask for an IP address, I'm going to give you an IP address. Doesn't work, does it? But you can send it to a remediation server, and it'll fix those problems for you. Terminal Service Gateway is combined with NAP when it uses the HRA to ensure that the client is compliant with the health and security policies of the network. If it's not, then it will bring it back up. 801.x, that's the IEEE standard for wireless authentication approach. It's the new one. Jordan and Cole, this is probably repeating for you. Basically what it is allows any communications that are unauthorized or unauthenticated, it has to go through the NAP compliance. All right. Any questions? Again, as a reminder, you have this part. You have quiz next week, quiz the third week. Then the fourth Tuesday, you're going to have your final exam, written final exam. You're going to have your hands-on final exam on the 9th. Your practice is on the 6th. Is there any questions? All right.